Welcome to Living Fully. Each episode is a chance to talk about mental health in a way that's simple, honest, and helpful. We'll share stories, tips, and tools to help you feel supported and feel your best. I'm your host, Catherine Hertig. This episode is about taking a moment to look back on the past year and think about what went well, even if it wasn't perfect. I talk with psychologist Lisa McIsaac about how focusing on the good, practicing gratitude, and being kind to yourself can make a big difference. Instead of setting big, overwhelming goals for this new year, it's better to start small, daily habits that feel meaningful and doable for you. We also dive into why it's so easy to get caught up in perfectionism and how to let go of that pressure. You don't have to reinvent yourself every January. It's about finding what works for you, focusing on progress over perfection, and keeping your mental health front and center. So it's a new year, and for a lot of us, we take stock in the year that's passed, what was good, what was not so good, and also look to the year ahead. Maybe set some goals, think about what we want to change. So today we're going to talk to Lisa McIsaac, and we're going to talk about how to go about this reflection in a healthy way, a self-compassionate way, and how we can set realistic intentions going forward. So Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You haven't been on the podcast yet, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Lisa McIsaac. I'm a registered psychologist and associate director here at Calgary Counseling Center.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So let's get into it. Lisa, when we look back on the year, how can we kind of focus on the good moments, even if it's had its challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that comes up in therapy quite often, actually. As human beings, we have a tendency to focus on what's not working and often dismiss what is working and going well. I try to help clients identify what is going well in your life, to practice gratitude and appreciation for what is working and to take time to reflect on what they can take away and learn from what has transpired that is less ideal, so that they can view them as opportunities for growth. Because sometimes things that happen in our life is like an adverse event is an opportunity for us to look back and strengthen and have self-compassion in regards to how we handled that situation.
Yeah.
So, how our experiences can help shape our goals for the next year is important, and to help people strategize and be more in alignment with the way that they want to show up in the world. So I also emphasize that, re-examining their perspective, around the event can also help, and to help explore alternative perspectives that may be more helpful.
What does that work look like? Getting people to kind of change their perspective on things that have happened?
Yeah, so sometimes people may be stuck in a narrative, that something that somebody did was because of them. Or so, for example, if a person was experiencing interpartner violence, they might think, I did something wrong, or maybe I should have behaved differently, or maybe I'm not lovable. And so it might help them explore that person's behavior and attribute it to that person, and, have more self-compassion in regards to how they handled that situation, and be able to look at, the strengths that they have and maybe some of their past experience that may have shaped those beliefs.
Yeah, it's a really important skill to build.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you suggest is kind of, a simple way to reflect on what worked for us? If we're thinking about mental health, what worked for us to be more mentally and emotionally healthy in the past year?
Yeah, it can help to make a mental inventory of, the past year, and what were some of the things that brought us joy, some good memories. They can be really simple. What are we proud of?
Yeah.
And is there a way that you can identify that you've grown and changed, in a positive way?
I like that, because like you said, we tend to focus on the negative, but if we really intentionally pause and think about our accomplishments,
yeah,
I'm sure that can have a really big effect.
Yeah, and is there anything that really stands out to you, something that impacted you or really resonated with you in the last year?
Yeah.
And kind of bringing that to the forefront.
And then looking at the year ahead, I know we still talk about New Year's resolutions, even though that can be a slippery slope. But how can we, instead kind of reframe it? How can we set intentions for the new year that feel meaningful rather than just putting pressure on ourselves?
Yeah, I think people tend to set really lofty goals in January, which can be overwhelming and a little bit debilitating. And that's why people generally will set themselves up for failure in that regard. I think it's important to remember to set small and tangible goals for the year, some realistic goals, set yourself up for success. Sometimes I will ask clients, if you look forward a year from now, how will you know that your life has changed or improved, or what would you like to be better? And if you can visualize that, then you can set small, tangible goals.
Okay, yeah.
And try to set goals for like daily activities, things that you can do in the moment to like practice goals for change. So as opposed to like a big outcome, what are some daily practices that you can incorporate into your life that will contribute to larger change like overall? I
remember that question from my own counseling experience, like, in a year or whatever, what's going to change? Like, what will your life look like? How will you know that you've made the changes you want? So I like that idea of kind of picturing the end result.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I find, New Year's resolutions kind of funny because it's like a lot of people set this kind of all or nothing. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to go 4 days a week. And, mid-January, I haven't done that. So now I failed.
Right.
But I think it should be more of a thought of like, something's better than nothing. So if you've increased if that was your goal, then maybe just thinking of like, if you've increased your activity at all, then that's something to be proud of.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes, it could be simple self-care or self-compassion or setting boundaries or learning how to say no.
Yeah.
And practicing that. And I like to use the word practice a lot because instead of all or nothing kind of change, a practice is something that you implement and you strive towards. And every single day you have an opportunity to address that goal or address that practice and reset. So, if you do it day to day versus, having an all or nothing kind of approach, it sets people up for more success and also helps incorporate that idea that, it's not an all or nothing behavior. It's a behavior that you revisit and it changes and fluctuates with your mood. I mean, none of us show up every single day the exact same way.
No.
And sometimes we have a lot of energy and sometimes we don't have a lot of energy. And, the way that we show up and what we do is going to fluctuate.
So when we're setting goals, how important is that to have like a positive mindset and perspective?
I think, I hate to get caught up on the word positive mindset and perspective because sometimes, it's about just self-acceptance. It's about accepting where you're at.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to show up with positivity and be energetic. It's about accepting where you're at, and that in and of itself, I think, generates positivity. Right?
Yeah, so even if you're not motivated, just kind of being like, that's okay, this is where I'm at right now.
Well, it's okay to have a day when you're not motivated, but, foster the idea that you can get up tomorrow and, you can try again.
Yeah. Do you think taking time, like if we're looking back at our past year, do you think taking this time to reflect can help with mental well-being?
I think taking time to practice self-reflection is really key. Being attuned to yourself and what you're feeling in your body, like where you're carrying tension, how you're feeling emotionally, how that's impacting your thoughts, and how you're showing up in relationships, is really important. So reflection is also a form of practice, and it's key to being self-aware so that we're showing up in a way that's congruent with how we want to be seen, right? How do we want to be in relationships and, how we're in alignment with our goals.
Can you have too much of a good thing? Can you be too introspective and be focusing too much on what's going on internally? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And, that's a complicated question because I think some of us are more inclined to be to go inward and to be more self-reflective.
Yeah.
I don't think that reflection is a bad thing, but I think if you're ruminating and overthinking and it's more worry and anxiousness, then that could be problematic.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then as we're doing this reflection, what kinds of questions do you think we should be asking ourselves when thinking about like what we want for ourselves and our mental health in the new year?
Yeah, so some questions that I like to have with clients are like, how do you want to be different, right? You know, what would that look like? How will you know if you're on the right track? What do you want to improve upon? You know, what brings you joy? Are you living the life that you want, or could you do this better? And what does better look like? You know, are you happy with yourself? And if not, how can you improve your relationship with yourself and other people? I like to choose a word that inspires me every year. So rather than a goal, I pick something inspirational that I can aspire to. And, you know, and I think about that on a regular basis and how I can incorporate that into my life.
What was your word this year?
Prosperity, actually.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And how did it go? Were you able to kind of fit that in?
I think I had a really great and prosperous year.
Excellent.
You know, I made a lot of changes in my life. I did some traveling. I spent quality time with people that I love. I picked up some really healthy habits. And I transitioned here and to this role. So I would say that it was a very, very good year for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we touched on this before. I mean, a lot of people, they get caught up in perfectionism when setting the goals, like the all or nothing. So how do we go about letting that go?
Yeah, so lofty goals can be overwhelming, as I mentioned already, and that people should set tangible goals and stop setting like too high and unrealistic expectations for themselves.
Yeah, I kind of picture like the top of a staircase, like people pick that goal, but instead they should be focusing on like a couple steps up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and learning how to celebrate being in the moment and everyday little successes.
Yeah.
You know, learning to be appreciative of what is and stop over delivering. So over delivering is like high performing people. And, you know, a lot of us are guilty of that, and me included. You know, you don't generally go get like higher education or strive to be in leadership positions and things like that unless you're really an overachiever. So some of us have innate personality trait, I guess, that drives us in that way. So it's important to take into account, I think, the time and the resources that are required, you know, to complete a piece of work, you know, to try to set different expectations so that you're doing things well and you're doing them in a timely manner and you're not committing too much time and energy. And sometimes perfectionism can lead individuals to taking too much time for fear of not doing things right.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's important to learn and practice letting go of control, delegating, you know, asking for help, letting other people do things, relaxing, you know, your approach, and setting time for balance. So, you know, self-care, extracurricular, and scheduling those things in and making sure that you prioritize them and take time for them so you're not just putting too much time and effort on your goals and on work.
Yeah, spreading out your energy.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're not going to accomplish everything we set out to. So how can we treat ourselves with more kindness when we look back on the things that we didn't accomplish?
Learning to let go and practice letting go. You know, I say to clients, you can't go back and fix it. So when you're taking up too much rent in your head on things that are in the past, you're basically sacrificing your time today for what was done yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, so focusing on the here and now and reprioritizing and practicing self-acceptance and compassion is important. Acknowledging what else you accomplished that year, right? So if you didn't accomplish that, what were you doing? Where did your time and energy go?
Right.
Right? What was purposeful and meaningful to you? And maybe sometimes, you know, life throws you a curveball and other things take precedence, and, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah, I could see that. Like if you're looking back and you look at what you did spend your time on, then maybe it's not that the goal wasn't successful. It wasn't the right goal. And then it's, you know, a matter of kind of shifting.
Well, I think oftentimes we all anticipate what is going to happen, but how often does life really go according to plan?
Yeah.
If life went according to plan, we'd all be in a different place, probably.
Definitely. So I don't want to say that there's like a secret to building habits that stick, but are there ways that we can set ourselves up for success when we want to build better habits, especially ones that help with our mental health?
Yeah, I think having realistic goals and strategies, so meeting the person where they're at. Consistency is key. You need to set up tangible goals that are meaningful to the client. You need to understand the client's motivation for change, right? So what's motivating you? Because if you're not really motivated to change, or if there isn't anything that is driving you, it's going to be a lot harder to achieve that result. So it's important to find out what's meaningful and kind of tap into that. No change is too small. I think that that's really important. As you mentioned earlier, I think people pick really big and lofty goals, and sometimes they're just unrealistic, and they set us up for failure.
And you only feel the accomplishment if it's something big.
Right.
I find like it can be hard sometimes to think like, oh, I sent that email that I thought was going to be hard. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, again, it's a perspective shift. Like if something was difficult and I did it, no matter how small, it's still a win.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And accountability, it helps to have somebody, who's supporting you or driving you. Clients will oftentimes say to me, oh, I need to book an appointment, because if I have an appointment, then I know you're going to ask me if I've done this thing, and I'm not going to want to tell you that I didn't.
Yeah,
so
totally.
That level of accountability helps motivate people.
For sure. I think we can often look outside, so whether that's social media or our friends, and kind of compare ourselves to what they're doing. So how can we figure out what healthy habits, what goals we want to set, ones that make sense for our life? How do we do that instead of just copying what works for everyone else?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of peer pressure and societal pressure to be a certain way, or to show up in a way that is inauthentic, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of us are really truly happy when we're spinning our wheels and striving to be something that really doesn't resonate for us. So I think it's important to, to do that self-reflection and to go inward and to understand what's meaningful and purposeful for us, and to strive to be authentic and congruent, and to make changes that are going to be in alignment with, who we are as an individual, and to be able to honor ourselves in that process.
Yeah. So to kind of give the listeners some examples, what are just some ideas, some sample ideas of like a few small habits that you'd suggest to clients that they can add to their daily life but can really boost mental health?
Yeah, I would say go back to the basics. I think that the basics are essential. And oftentimes clients will come in, and they're expecting something really big and profound. But I think, you have to start with the foundations. Are you getting enough rest, right?
Yeah.
Are you eating a healthy and nutritious foods? Do you have a balanced diet? Are you socially engaged? Do you feel supported? Do you feel connected, to other people? Are you practicing self-compassion? Are you in a positive mindset?
Yeah.
Are you appreciative of what's working for you throughout the day? Do you reflect on, your accomplishments? And are you attuned to yourself? And I think that sometimes those simple practices can be really important. And apart from that, things like gratitude and journaling, and could be a 2-minute breathing practice, just settling down your parasympathetic system throughout the day and taking time to de-stress, or taking a mental break away from your computer at work and going for a walk at lunchtime. So those really, really simple things make huge differences overall.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated at how connected the body and mind are. And then really, if you do go back to those basics, like getting a good sleep and eating well and exercising, how much that can change your mood.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
There used to be a project in central Alberta called Move Your Mood.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they do this throughout Alberta anymore, but they used to work with youth, and the whole concept was on mitigating the risks of depression and incorporating activities to move youth's mood. And it had such a high success rate.
Yeah.
So those little incremental changes can have big outcomes.
It's just the tough thing for sure. It does work so well, but it's like you're not feeling like moving. When you're feeling depressed, it's hard to get yourself, to pull yourself up and get moving.
Oh, it absolutely is. But pushing yourself through that lack of motivation and doing the smallest and the simplest of tasks make a huge difference.
Yeah. Society seems to kind of push this idea that we have to reinvent ourselves every January, or that we should always be striving for self-improvement. How do we kind of push back against this and, kind of weave in more self-compassion, self-acceptance? I'm really big on this one because I think it's like we need to do this so much more. It shouldn't always be about change.
I think that's a social construct, and you don't have to buy into it for starters, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to buy into it. It's also like the concept of Valentine's Day. Do you love your loved ones on Valentine's Day, or do you love them every day? I think you have to give yourself permission to set your own values, and your own beliefs and behaviors that work for you. Let go of the expectations and pressures that other people put on you, whether they're, from family members or society. Then that can be one of the most important and gratifying actions or gifts that you can give yourself, is just permission to not subscribe, So make up your own mind, set your own values, set your own belief systems, and, and realize that you get to choose what ideologies that you want to subscribe to.
This idea of values has come up a few times. So how does someone take an inventory or kind of realize what their values are?
Well, that is a loaded question, because, we learn how to be in the world based upon our family of origin. If you grew up in a faith-based environment, you would learn some of your values from your faith-based environment. If you had a specific culture, you would learn, based upon your culture. So I think that some of those things can be conflicting.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just don't really resonate with the individual as a whole, which can create a lot of inner turmoil for people. A lot of the work that I do with clients is around identifying what those value systems are, deconstructing the ones that no longer fit for the client, and then identifying and reevaluating and reexamining the ones that do.
Yeah. Lisa, how do you think we can kind of balance the pressure to achieve, or the desire to change and get better, with our prioritizing our mental health and that self-acceptance that you talked about?
Life is all about balance, and when you put too much pressure on yourself in one aspect, something else is going. You're gonna the costs of that are going to be imminent, right? So I think it's always about balance. It's about what's the bigger picture, right? Why are you here?
Yeah.
There's this exercise that we learned in school years and years ago about, what do you want on your epitaph? And I thought, oh, what a morose kind of concept to think about. But it was actually really impactful.
Yeah.
Because it forced people to think about the end of their life, right? And I think in Western culture, we don't often think about the end of our life. Nobody really wants to think about that. But what it made people realize is that at the end of your life, it's very, very simple and basic things that are meaningful that you want to be remembered for.
Yeah.
So when you put those concepts into daily practice, it's about, why are we here? What is our purpose? We're not a Clydesdale. We're not a workhorse. And, our achievements are not really what people are going to remember us for. We're going to be remembered for our relationships and our impact and our kindness. And so it's about, how do you strike that balance, and how do you keep your focus on what's important, on a day-to-day basis, and not lose sight of that and get into just performance-based mindset.
Totally. Yeah, that's such a good reminder. And kind of one last question, Lisa. What's a good way to set goals or intentions without getting caught up in the fear of failure?
Yeah, I think that setting goals and objectives can be good. However, focusing on your journey, your own personal journey and, your growth process and your progress may be more helpful than focusing on specific goals and outcomes. So the former is more adaptive, and I think it's gentler, like to be in the process and to be adaptable rather than maybe having a definitive outcome in mind.
Yeah. Not recently, over the past few years, I've gotten really into running, and I found that has taught me so much about mental health. And I find that, what you just said there applies so much to that. Like I set a goal of like a race, but it really is the journey. It's every run in between. And like some runs are going to feel awful and some runs are going to feel great. And it's really like, the culmination of all of those little runs to the big one at the end.
And I think that's a really good example and good for you.
Thank you.
For being diligent about that and pushing through. But I think that's a really great realization, right? You're competing with yourself. You're not competing with other people.
Yeah.
And it's about the journey. It's about the process. And some days are better than others. But, when you take a step back and you look at the larger picture, that's growth.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else about reflection and setting goals for the new year? Anything we haven't touched on? Anything you want our listeners to know?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Centre podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick Here, Louisa Campos, Manuel Montano, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to Lisa McIsaac. To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counseling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counseling Centre and Counseling Alberta provide effective counseling to anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com and counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.